Get that filthy-mouthed girl." Sheriff Bolton's voice was a roar that shook the dusty planks of Copper Creek. Tabitha Lockhart didn't dare look back. Her lungs burned, her journal clutched to her chest like a shield. All she'd done was read a poem, just a few words about a woman's place in this world, about the silent graves where their dreams went to die. But in Arizona Territory, 1873, some words were more dangerous than a loaded gun. And she'd just fired a cannon right into the heart of the town's rotten soul. The sound of heavy boots hammered the dirt behind her, getting closer. She risked a glance. Two of Bolton's deputies, their faces twisted with grim satisfaction. They were herding her, pushing her away from the main street, away from any witnesses. She ducked into an alley, the smell of refuse and stale beer hitting her like a wall. A dead end. Of course it was a dead end. Rough hands grabbed her arms, spinning her around. The impact sent her journal flying, its pages scattering in the filth like broken wings. Her carefully pinned hair tumbled down, a cascade of honey brown over her shoulders. She had come here from Boston for freedom, for a new life, to teach, to write, to breathe. Instead, she was being suffocated. They dragged her behind the livery stable, where the shadows were deep and no one could hear you scream. Sheriff Bolton was waiting, tapping a thick wooden baton against his palm. The rhythmic thud was the only sound besides her own ragged breathing. "Time to teach you some respect for proper womanly behavior," Bolton sneered, his breath sour. The first blow landed across her shoulders. It stole the air from her lungs, a hot, searing pain that made her vision swim. But she wouldn't scream. She bit her lip until she tasted blood, but she would not give him the satisfaction. Strike after strike fell, a brutal lesson in silence. When they were done, they left her crumpled in the dirt. Her body was a symphony of pain, her spirit a shattered thing. As night fell, a cold, indifferent moon rose over the Arizona landscape. She lay there, listening to the taunts fade away, feeling the sting of betrayal far more than the welts on her back. Then she heard it. The slow, steady beat of a single horse approaching. Bolton, coming back to finish the job? She tried to gather her torn pages, her fingers trembling, her body refusing to obey. She was too weak to run, too broken to fight. But the figure who dismounted was not the sheriff. He was tall, silhouetted against the moonlight, with broad shoulders and the glint of a badge on his chest. He moved with a quiet confidence that was the exact opposite of Bolton's bluster. "Madam," his voice was deep and startlingly gentle. "Dear God, what happened to you?" Tabitha flinched as he knelt beside her. "Please," she whispered, her voice a raw croak, "just leave me be. I can't do that." He didn't try to touch her. Instead, he began to gather the scattered pages of her journal. He handled them with a strange reverence, as if they were precious artifacts. His eyes scanned a few lines on one of the torn pages, and in the silver light, she saw his expression change. It wasn't disgust. It wasn't judgment. It was wonder. "These words," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He looked from the page to her bruised face, and something powerful passed between them. "They're like a song I've been waiting to hear." He helped her to her feet, his touch firm but careful. "I'm Marshal Zachary Granger," he said, his voice low and steady. "And I believe you and I have a lot to discuss about Sheriff Bolton." She could only whisper her name. "Tabitha Lockhart, and there's nothing to discuss. This is just how things are here." Zach's jaw tightened. He carefully lifted her onto his magnificent buckskin horse, his strength a startling comfort. "Not anymore, Miss Lockhart," he said, the words a solemn vow. "Not anymore." As they rode slowly toward the hotel, she realized this man wasn't just another lawman. He hadn't dismissed her. He hadn't judged her. He had listened to her words, even when they were scattered in the dirt. And that made him the most dangerous man in Copper Creek. The hotel room was small, but clean. The proprietor's wife, a kind woman named Mrs. Oates, clucked over Tabitha's wounds, dabbing them with witch hazel and whispering reassurances. "Been waiting for someone to stand up to that brute Bolton," Mrs. Oates said, her voice a conspiratorial hiss. "Just didn't expect it to be such a delicate thing as yourself." "I was just reading poetry," Tabitha winced. "Words have power, dear," the old woman said, her eyes wise. "Especially the true ones. That's why men like Bolton fear them so." After she left, Zack returned with a tray of food. He set it down, keeping a respectful distance. His presence filled the small room, a quiet storm of authority and something else. Something softer. "Why are you helping me, Marshall?" she asked, pulling a borrowed shawl tighter around her shoulders. "You don't know me." "I know enough," he said, pouring her a cup of tea. "I know you were attacked for exercising your right to speak. That's not justice. That's tyranny." His green eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "Is that why you're here? To fight tyranny?" A bitter edge crept into her voice. He looked out the window, his gaze distant for a moment. "I'm here because 3 women have disappeared from this region in the past year. All newcomers, all educated, all independent." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "The kind of women who might write poetry." Tabitha's hand trembled, sloshing tea onto the blanket. The room suddenly felt colder. Disappeared. The word echoed the lines she had written, the ones that had earned her a beating. The silent graves of women's dreams. You think there's a connection?" she whispered. "I'd like to read the poem that got you beaten," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Not to judge, Miss Lockhart. To understand." She hesitated for a long moment, studying his face. She saw no mockery, no deceit, only a raw, searching honesty. Slowly she reached for her journal and handed it to him. "Page 37, she said. He turned to the page, and as he read, she watched his face transform. Surprise, admiration, and then a quiet, simmering rage. He looked up from the page, his eyes boring into hers. "This isn't just poetry, Miss Lockhart. These are observations. You've been noticing things." "I'm a teacher," she said, her voice shaky. "I listen. I hear stories from other women, stories about those who came before me, full of hope, only to vanish." Zack closed the journal, his movements deliberate. "I think your beating wasn't just about silencing a woman. I think Sheriff Bolton was afraid of what you already know." A chill went down her spine that had nothing to do with her injuries. He wasn't just a marshal. He was a hunter. And he believed she had stumbled right into the monster's den. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice like flint. "I start asking questions, official ones. And your words, Miss Lockhart, might just be the most important evidence I have." He stood to leave, pausing at the door. "Thank you," she called out, "for believing me." He turned back, his silhouette framed by the dim hallway light. "Your words are clear, true, and brave," he said. "Rest well." But how could she rest? She was no longer just a poet who had spoken out of turn. She was a witness. And in a town like Copper Creek, witnesses had a habit of disappearing. Dawn broke with the sound of shouting. Tabitha moved to the window, her body a canvas of aches and bruises. Down below, Marshal Granger stood face to face with Sheriff Bolton and 3 of his deputies. It was a standoff in the middle of Main Street. "This is federal jurisdiction now, Bolton." Zack's voice cut through the morning air, sharp as a razor. "Those women disappeared on your watch. I'm here to find out why." Bolton's face was a blotchy red. "You got no right. We investigated proper." "Proper?" Zack shot back, his stance relaxed but coiled, like a panther. You mean declaring they'd all run off to California? No search parties, no telegrams, nothing. Women come and go, Bolton spat. Not my fault if they can't handle frontier life. Then Zach's voice dropped, becoming dangerously quiet. And I suppose Miss Lockhart couldn't handle frontier life either. Is that why your men beat her for reciting poetry? Bolton's eyes darted up to her window. Tabitha stepped back, her heart hammering. He knew she was watching. That Boston girl was stirring up trouble, Bolton roared. Ideas like women deserving equal treatment. Zach stepped closer. Or ideas about why so many newcomers vanish from your town. A crowd was gathering, fearful faces, resentful faces. Tabitha saw women at the edges, whispering, their eyes full of a desperate hope. You're overstepping, Marshal, Bolton growled, his hand inching toward his gun. This is United States territory, Zach corrected him calmly, pulling a document from his vest. And this is a federal warrant for the case files of Emily Whitman, Sarah Coleman, and Rebecca James. I'm starting with a full review of your records. Now. Bolton looked like he was about to draw. The whole street held its breath. Then, he spat on the ground. Town Hall, 1 hour, but you won't find nothing. He turned, then paused, his eyes locking on her window again. And that Lockhart woman, she'd best watch herself. Accidents happen. The threat was unmistakable. Zach didn't move a muscle, but his voice was like ice. Threaten her again, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. And you'll be on the first prison wagon to Yuma. Bolton and his men stalked away. Zach looked up, his eyes finding hers. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was a promise, a shield. But she knew shields could be broken. A soft knock came at her door. It was Mrs. Oates with breakfast, but she wasn't alone. Standing nervously behind her was Violet Cooper, a young seamstress's assistant who had been at the poetry reading. She was hoping for a word with you, Mrs. Oates said, giving Tabitha a meaningful look. Once they were alone, Violet spoke in an urgent whisper. Your poem, Miss Lockhart, about the graves of women's dreams. It was about them, wasn't it? The ones who disappeared. Tabitha's blood ran cold. You knew them. I knew Emily Whitman best, Violet said, twisting her apron. She was the school teacher before you. She was asking questions about the mine, about the land deeds. Her eyes were wide with terror, and then she was gone. Tabitha leaned forward. What happened? Sheriff Bolton said she moved on, but all her things were still in her room, and there was a letter. Violet glanced nervously toward the window, as if Bolton himself might be listening. What letter? A letter she wrote to the territorial governor, Violet whispered, her voice trembling. About irregularities at the Silver Eagle mine. I found it when I was cleaning her room. I kept it hidden. If Bolton knew I had it. Does Marshal Granger know? No, I was too afraid. Until this morning. Until I saw him stand up to Bolton. Violet reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded, worn piece of paper. Take it, please. Maybe it can help find out what happened to Emily. Tabitha took the letter. It felt impossibly heavy. Thank you, Violet. This is incredibly brave. Your words gave me courage, Violet said, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. Be careful. Bolton has friends in high places. After she left, Tabitha unfolded the letter. Emily Whitman's handwriting was precise, methodical. She detailed her suspicion that the Silver Eagle mine, the town's lifeblood, was operating on falsified land claims. Land that rightfully belonged to the nearby Apache tribe. But it was the next part that made Tabitha's breath catch in her throat. Emily had found evidence that the mine's owner, the untouchable Judge Harold Blackstone, had conspired with Sheriff Bolton to forge the documents and intimidate anyone who got in their way. The letter was dated just 3 days before Emily vanished. This wasn't just about silencing women. This was about murder. Another knock echoed through the room, sharp and urgent. It was Zack, his expression grim. "Miss Lockhart, pack your things. We need to leave, now." "What is it?" "Bolton's men are watching the hotel. I don't trust them for a second," he said. Then his eyes fell on the letter in her hand. "I was just coming to find you," she said, handing it to him. "I think I know why those women disappeared." He read it in seconds, his jaw tightening into a line of granite. "Blackstone, this confirms everything." He looked up, his eyes blazing. "This letter makes you the most dangerous person in Arizona. It's a death warrant." He glanced around the small room. "Can you ride?" "Yes." "Good. Pack what you can carry. I'm taking you to a friend's ranch outside of town. You'll be safe there." "I'm not running away," Tabitha said, standing as tall as her bruised body would allow. "Those women deserve justice. My word started this. I won't hide while you face Blackstone and Bolton alone." He looked at her, a flicker of something she couldn't name. Admiration, maybe concern, in his eyes. "I'm not asking you to hide, Miss Lockhart. I'm asking you to stay alive, to tell their story, and mine, if things go badly." The intensity in his gaze stole her breath. He expected a war. "The ranch belongs to my old army friend, Daniel Morgan. Bolton's men won't follow us there. It's on the edge of Apache territory." She hesitated for only a second. "Very well, Marshal. But you have to promise you'll keep me informed." "I'll do better than that," he said, helping her with her small bag. "I'll consult with you. You see patterns in this town that a lawman might miss." They slipped out the back of the hotel to where 2 horses stood waiting. As they rode out of town, taking a winding path through the chaparral, Zack glanced over at her. "I've been tracking a pattern of missing women across 3 territories for 2 years," he said, his voice low. "Something bigger is happening here. Copper Creek is just one piece of a very dark puzzle." "You think Emily and the others—" "I think they stumbled onto something that powerful men want, kept silent, and I think your poetry, Miss Lockhart, accidentally lit a match in a powder keg." He looked at her with a new kind of respect. "Sometimes," he said as they urged their horses toward the distant hills, "a poet sees what a lawman misses." The ride was a blur of rugged canyons and sun-baked mesas. The Arizona landscape was beautiful, but it felt menacing, as if the land itself held dark secrets. Tabitha rode beside Zack, a strange sense of calm settling over her. He was a man who listened to words, a man who saw their power. For the first time since coming west, she didn't feel entirely alone. "My father was a literature professor," she found herself telling him as they crossed a shallow stream. Before he lost his way, he taught me that words could build worlds, or they could burn them down." "My mother loved poetry," Zack replied, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "She'd recite it while she worked the farm. After she died, the world had less music in it." It was a small window into the man behind the badge, the man who quoted poetry to a beaten woman in a back alley. He wasn't just a lawman, he was something more. He pointed to a plume of smoke in the distance. "That's the Morgan Ranch. We're almost there." But as they drew closer, Tabitha felt a prickle of unease. They were riding towards safety, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were just moving from one cage to another. The Morgan Ranch was an oasis in the harsh landscape, a sprawling, well-kept property that spoke of hard work and prosperity. A man with a salt and pepper beard, Daniel Morgan, emerged from the barn, his face breaking into a wide grin. "Zack Granger, as I live and breathe," he boomed, clasping Zack's hand. "Daniel, good to see you," Zack replied, then turned to help Tabitha down. This is Miss Tabitha Lockhart. She's in some trouble. Needs a safe place for a few days. Daniel's friendly expression vanished the moment he saw her bruised face. His eyes hardened. Bolton's work, he said. It wasn't a question. On his orders, Zack confirmed. Then any enemy of that corrupt snake is a friend of ours, Daniel said, a fire in his eyes. A woman, Hannah Morgan, appeared in the doorway, her face kind but etched with worry. She quickly ushered Tabitha inside, her warmth a soothing balm. Over a hearty lunch, Zack explained the situation. The missing women, the letter, Judge Blackstone's conspiracy. Bolton has been Blackstone's attack dog for years, Daniel said, his knuckles white as he gripped a biscuit, terrorizing anyone who questions the judge's authority. But the letter changes things, Zack said. It's proof of land fraud, and it connects them to Emily Whitman's disappearance. The Apache have been complaining about Blackstone's mine encroaching on their treaty lands for months, Daniel added, his brow furrowed. Chief Nahill is a patient man, but he's close to his limit. Zack's expression grew thoughtful. I need to talk to him. He might know something about what happened to those women. He might, Hannah Morgan said, surprising them all. He respects Daniel, and his daughter, Nasha, was educated at the mission school. She speaks perfect English. I have to go back to town tonight, Zack said, his face troubled. I need to get into the town hall, look at those land deeds myself before Bolton or Blackstone can destroy them. You can't go alone, Tabitha protested immediately. It's a trap. His eyes met hers across the table, and the raw concern in his gaze made her heart skip a beat. That's why I need you safe here, he said softly. If something happens to me, you have the letter. You are the witness. I'll ride with you, Daniel offered at once. 2 guns are better than 1 against Bolton's crew. As the men made their plans, Hannah led Tabitha out to a small garden. Daniel and Zack served together in the war, she explained. Zack saved my husband's life. It's a bond that doesn't break. She paused, giving Tabitha a knowing look. He's a good man, Zack is. Honorable. He's been alone a long time. I see the way he looks at you, like a man who's found water after crossing a desert. Tabitha felt a blush rise to her cheeks. He admires my poetry. He admires more than your poetry, dear, Hannah said with a gentle smile. Before Tabitha could reply, a shout came from the ranch house. Daniel was waving frantically, pointing down the road. A cloud of dust was approaching, fast, at least a half-dozen riders. That's not Bolton's men, Hannah said, her voice tight with alarm. They wouldn't approach so openly. They hurried back to find Zack and Daniel already mounted, rifles in hand. As the riders drew closer, their identity became clear. They weren't deputies. They were Apache warriors. At their head rode a dignified man with silver in his hair, his face a mask of grim purpose. That's Chief Nahill himself, Daniel said, his voice filled with shock. Something is wrong, terribly wrong. Chief Nahill halted his warriors a respectful distance from the house. He raised a hand, not in greeting, but as a signal. Beside him rode a young woman with intelligent, watchful eyes, Nasha. Daniel rode out to meet them. The conversation was brief and tense. When he returned, his face was pale. His scouts found something, Daniel said, his voice strained. Something we need to see, up in the hills, on the disputed land. Zack's hand instinctively went to his sidearm. What is it? Daniel looked from Zack to Tabitha, his eyes full of a terrible knowledge. Fresh graves, he said. 3 of them. A cold dread washed over Tabitha, the silent graves of women's dreams, her poem. It wasn't a metaphor anymore, it was a map. I'm coming with you, she said, her voice shaking but firm. If it was them, if it was Emily, Sarah, and Rebecca, she had to bear witness. It's too dangerous, Zack argued, his jaw tight. More dangerous than staying here, waiting for Bolton's men to find me, she countered. I knew Emily. I have to go. Hannah placed a hand on Zach's arm. She's right, Zach, and Nasha would welcome another woman's presence. The Apache respect those who honor their dead. Zach looked at her, a war of emotions on his face. He finally gave a curt nod. Stay close to me, at all times. Chief Nahil studied Tabitha with piercing eyes as Daniel made the introductions. When Nasha translated that Tabitha was the woman who speaks truth with her writing spirit, a flicker of approval crossed the chief's face. My father says the land where the graves lie is sacred, Nasha explained, her voice heavy. It was protected by the treaty. The mining company has been trespassing for months. When our warriors protested, Sheriff Bolton threatened war. Tell your father, Zach said, his voice ringing with authority, that as a federal marshal, I uphold those treaties. If Judge Blackstone has violated Apache land, he will answer for it. They rode out single file, following the Apache warriors into the foothills. The journey was tense, silent. Nasha dropped back to ride beside Tabitha. The marks on your face, she said quietly, her gaze direct. They are the marks of the white man's fear. My father says only weak men beat women for their words. Your marshal seems different, Nasha observed. He believes in justice for all people, Tabitha replied. And you? What do you believe in, Tabitha Lockhart? I believe in the power of words to reveal the truth, Tabitha said. I believe women's voices matter, and I believe your people's rights to their sacred lands matter. Nasha nodded slowly. Then perhaps you are the one to tell this story. She pointed ahead to a ridge. We are almost there. Prepare your heart for what you will see. The graves were in a small, sheltered valley. 3 mounds of disturbed earth, marked with crude wooden crosses. No names, just dates. Dates that matched the disappearances of Emily, Sarah, and Rebecca. The air was heavy with sorrow. My father's hunters found this place 4 days ago, Nasha translated, as the warriors formed a silent, respectful perimeter. Last night, they saw white men here, digging, searching for something. Zach knelt by one of the graves. Dug in haste, but someone cared enough to put up crosses. That doesn't feel like Bolton's work. Someone with a conscience, Tabitha whispered, a knot of grief in her throat. Someone who couldn't save them, but wouldn't leave them unburied. Just then, Chief Nahil spoke, and Nasha held something out to Zach. It was a tarnished silver locket. Tabitha gasped. That's Emily's. She never took it off. It has a portrait of her mother inside. Zach opened it carefully. Inside was the tiny, faded photograph of an older woman. But Zach's fingers kept probing the back of the locket. He pressed on a small, almost invisible seam. A false back clicked open. There was no second portrait. Instead, tucked into the tiny hidden compartment, was a minuscule, tightly folded piece of paper. It wasn't a note. It wasn't a letter. Zach unfolded it with painstaking care. It was a map, a hand-drawn map of the valley they were standing in. And on that map was a single, starkly drawn X. Right next to it were 3 words that sealed everyone's fate. The mother lode. It wasn't just about the land, Zach breathed, his voice filled with dawning horror. The main silver vein, it's not in Blackstone's mine. It's here, on sacred Apache land. Emily found it, Tabitha whispered. She found the source of all of it. That's why they killed her. Greed and murder, a story as old as time. But before anyone could process the terrifying discovery, a sharp whistle pierced the air. It was an Apache scout, high on the ridge. He was signaling danger. Riders coming, Daniel said, his hand on his rifle. At least 8 of them, from the direction of town. Bolton, Zach swore. Someone talked. Chief Nahil spoke an urgent command. My father offers you sanctuary in our village, Nasha translated quickly. Bolton's men are superstitious. They will not follow us deep into Apache territory. We accept, Zack said without hesitation. Lead the way. As they scrambled for their horses, Zack's eyes met Tabitha's. The grim set of his jaw told her everything. This wasn't just an investigation anymore. It was a hunt. And now, they were the prey. They rode like the devil was chasing them, deeper into the canyons, the hoofbeats of Bolton's posse echoing behind them. The Apache village was a hidden sanctuary, nestled in a valley that was nearly impossible to find. As they were led into the safety of the village, Tabitha felt like she'd crossed into another world. They were safe, for now, but they were trapped. That night in the council lodge, the air was thick with tension. Tabitha wrote in her journal by firelight, the words pouring out of her, grief, fear, and a burning, righteous anger. Zack came and sat beside her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "I never imagined," she started, then trailed off. From a Boston schoolroom to an Apache village, hiding from murderers. "Life rarely follows the maps we draw for it," he said, a faint smile on his lips. "Yesterday," she said, looking up from her journal, "you said my words were like a song you'd been waiting to hear. What did you mean?" He looked into the fire, his face etched in flickering light. "For years, I've seen the worst of humanity. The greed, the violence. It can make you wonder if you're fighting a losing battle." His gaze met hers, intense and sincere. "Then I read your poetry, your truth about women's hopes and struggles. It was a voice of clarity in all the chaos. It reminded me why this work, why justice, matters." His hand moved closer to hers on the woven mat, not quite touching, but the space between them crackled with energy. "Your words don't frighten me, Tabitha. They give me hope." Before she could answer, Daniel approached. "Nahill's scouts have returned. Bolton's men searched the burial site, but they pulled back. They didn't follow us." "That buys us time," Zack said, standing. "We ride for Tucson at first light. With federal reinforcements, we can take down Blackstone and his whole rotten empire." "My father offers warriors to escort you," Nasha said, joining them. "But he asks that the woman who writes truth stay here. You will be safer." "That's a good idea," Zack agreed, turning to Tabitha. But she shook her head. "No, my place is with you. I am a witness, and Emily's map is evidence. Besides," she added, a new resolve hardening her voice, "Tucson has a newspaper. This story needs to be told, not just in a courtroom, but everywhere." Nasha smiled. After translating for her father, she said, "He says you have the spirit of an Apache warrior, stubborn and brave." The next morning, as they prepared to leave, Nasha brought Tabitha to meet her grandmother, Ista, the tribe's storyteller. The old woman's eyes were ancient and wise. "Those who keep stories are sacred," Nasha translated. "They carry the truth of a people. You must carry the story of the three women and the story of our stolen land. The two stories are one." Then her voice softened. "She also says the man who values your words has a good spirit, but she sees a shadow near him. One of his friends is not a true friend." The warning sent a shiver down Tabitha's spine. She glanced over at Zack, standing with Daniel Morgan. Daniel, his loyal army friend. It couldn't be. Could it? Grandmother Ista pressed a small leather pouch into her hand. "For protection," Nasha said. The ride to Tucson was a long, grueling journey, made worse by the seed of doubt the old woman had planted. Tabitha watched Daniel Morgan, searching for any sign of deception, but saw only steadfast loyalty. Was the old woman mistaken? They reached the territorial capital by late afternoon. Zack went straight to his superior, Marshal James Hollister, a grizzled veteran who listened to their story with a grim face. Blackstone has friends in high places, Hollister warned. But murder and violating a federal treaty, not even his friends can cover that up. He turned to a deputy. "Gather 6 men. We ride at dawn." "We should go to the newspaper," Tabitha insisted. "Public exposure will make it harder for Blackstone's allies to interfere." Hollister stroked his chin. "The lady has a point." The editor of the Arizona Citizen, Edward Bynes, was a sharp-eyed man who practically vibrated with energy. He listened to their story, his pen flying across the page. "This is it," Bynes declared. "Corruption, murder, stolen land. This will blow the lid off the territory." He turned to Tabitha. "Miss Lockhart, would you write a piece? Your perspective, the story of the women who were silenced." "I would be honored," she said. As she wrote, the words flowing like a river of righteous fury, she felt a sense of purpose she'd never known. This was why she had been given a voice. They left the newspaper office as the sun was setting, painting the adobe buildings in gold and crimson. "Your courage has been remarkable," Zach said, stopping in the street to face her. "When I found you, beaten but defiant, you reminded me what I was fighting for." They stood close, the world fading away around them. He looked from her eyes to her lips, and her breath caught. "Marshal Granger." The moment shattered. It was Daniel, running toward them, a piece of paper in his hand. "A telegram just came in for Marshal Hollister. It's from Copper Creek." Zach snatched the paper. His face went pale. "It's from one of Hollister's informants," he said, his voice tight. "Bolton and Blackstone know we're coming. They're packing up. They've booked passage on tomorrow's eastbound train. They're running." "Then we don't wait for dawn," Zach declared, his eyes like chips of ice. "We ride tonight." He turned to Tabitha. "You stay here. It's safe." "No," she said, her voice unshakable. "I'm seeing this through to the end. Tabitha, these men are killers." "And I am their witness," she countered, touching his arm. "They won't silence me now." He searched her eyes and saw a strength that matched his own. He nodded. "Stay close to me." Within the hour, they were riding north, a posse of 9 riders against a dark conspiracy. But Tabitha couldn't shake Grandmother Ista's warning. A shadow near him, a friend who is not a friend. Was the telegram real? Or was it a trap, a lure to draw them into an ambush? She looked at Daniel Morgan, riding just ahead, his face set in a determined mask. And for the first time, she was more afraid of the man beside them than the enemies they were riding to face. They rode through the night like ghosts, the only sound the drumming of hooves and the wind whispering through the sagebrush. By dawn, they reached the hills overlooking Copper Creek. Scouts reported activity at Judge Blackstone's mansion. Wagons were being loaded. Armed guards were everywhere. "They're heading for the Silver Springs train station," Marshal Hollister said, studying the scene through a spyglass. "There's a narrow pass 3 miles east of here. It's the only road. We can trap them." The plan was simple. Hollister would take 4 men and block the front of the pass. Zach, Daniel, and 2 other deputies would circle around and cut off their retreat. "Miss Lockhart stays with me," Zach said, his voice leaving no room for argument. As they rode to their position, the paranoia gnawed at Tabitha. Every time Daniel Morgan glanced their way, she felt a chill. The telegram had been too convenient, the escape plan too obvious. "You're quiet," Zach observed. "Just thinking about how easily I could have shared their fate," she said, unwilling to voice her suspicion about his friend. Then the signal came. Blackstone's convoy was on the move. A covered wagon, flanked by Sheriff Bolton and a dozen heavily armed men. From their hiding place in the rocks, they watched the procession enter the pass. Hollister's voice boomed, demanding their surrender. For a heartbeat, There was silence. Then, all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted, echoing off the canyon walls. It was a full-blown firefight. "Time to close the trap," Zack said grimly. He turned to Tabitha. "Stay here with Deputy Wilson. Do not move." As Zack and Daniel rode down into the fray, flanking the outlaws, Tabitha's heart pounded. She could see men falling, the chaos of battle unfolding below. Then she saw it. Sheriff Bolton, breaking away from the main group, spurring his horse up a side trail. He was escaping, and he was heading directly toward her position. "He's coming this way," Deputy Wilson shouted, drawing his pistol. Bolton crested the rise and saw them. A snarl of pure hatred twisted his face. He raised his pistol and fired. Wilson cried out, clutching a bloody shoulder as he tumbled behind a rock. Tabitha was alone, exposed, staring down the barrel of a gun held by the man who had ordered her beaten half to death. "You!" Bolton spat, his eyes wild with rage. "I should have finished the job." In that moment, a strange calm fell over her. Her fear was gone, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. "You silenced Emily and the others," she said, her voice ringing out, steady and strong. "But you will not silence me. Their story will be told." His finger tightened on the trigger. A single shot cracked through the air. It wasn't from Bolton's gun. The sheriff jerked backward, a look of stunned surprise on his face, before he toppled from his horse, dead before he hit the ground. 50 yards away, Zack stood, his pistol smoking, his eyes locked with hers, filled with a relief so profound it was a physical blow. But the battle wasn't over. Down in the pass, Judge Blackstone was cornered, his men throwing down their weapons. But one man was still fighting. Daniel Morgan. He was locked in a brutal exchange of fire with Blackstone himself. Then the unthinkable happened. As Zack started toward her, Daniel spun around. He wasn't aiming at Blackstone anymore. He was aiming his rifle straight at Zack. "Daniel, no!" Zack yelled, his face a mask of disbelief and betrayal. "I'm sorry, Zack," Daniel shouted, his voice choked with desperation. "Blackstone owns my ranch. The deed, the debt, everything. He said he'd ruin me, ruin Hannah. He promised to wipe the slate clean if I took care of you." Grandmother Ista's warning, a friend who is not a friend. The telegram hadn't been an informant's tip. It had been a lure, a trap set by Daniel. Before Daniel could fire, Tabitha acted. She grabbed a loose rock and hurled it down the hillside. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The rock clattered near Daniel's horse, spooking it. The horse shied, throwing off Daniel's aim just as he pulled the trigger. The shot went wide. That split second was all Zack needed. He fired once, not a kill shot. A shot to Daniel's rifle hand, sending the weapon flying. It was over. By midday, Judge Blackstone and his men were in chains. Daniel Morgan sat slumped against a rock, his face buried in his hands, a broken man. The marshals were sorting through Blackstone's wagons, finding ledgers and documents that detailed a web of corruption stretching across the entire territory. Tabitha tended to the wounded deputy, her hands moving with a steady confidence she didn't know she possessed. Later, she found Zack standing on the ridge where the final shot was fired, looking down at the town of Copper Creek. "It's over," she said softly. "This part is," he agreed, not looking at her. The betrayal had cut him deep. Their stories will be told now. They'll have justice. He finally turned to her, the afternoon sun lighting the pain in his eyes. "What will you do now?" "Mr. Bynes offered me a job," she said. "Writing for the paper, telling the stories that need to be told." A faint smile touched his lips. "You'll be good at that. Your voice has power." "And you?" she asked. "Will you keep chasing justice across the territories?" "That's been my life for a long time," he said. But lately, I've been thinking there's more to living than just the next case. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. The warmth of his touch chased away the last of the day's chill. Your words, Tabitha Lockhart, he said, his voice low and full of an emotion that made her heart ache. They're a song I've been waiting my whole life to hear, clear and true and brave. I don't ever want to stop listening. Then don't, she whispered, her hand reaching up to touch his face. Some songs are meant to last a lifetime. He leaned down and kissed her, a kiss that wasn't about victory or relief, but about a profound and deeply earned beginning. In the harsh, unforgiving land where she had nearly lost her voice forever, she had found the one man who could hear her soul. The trials of Judge Blackstone and Daniel Morgan were the biggest sensation the Arizona Territory had ever seen. Tabitha's articles, published in the Arizona Citizen and reprinted in papers across the country, laid the conspiracy bare. Her words, once punished with blows, now brought down one of the most powerful men in the West. The Apache Treaty was honored, their sacred land returned. The bodies of Emily, Sarah, and Rebecca were brought to Tucson and given a proper burial, with Tabitha reading a new poem at their graveside. A poem not about silent graves, but about voices that could never truly be silenced. Zach was offered the position of chief marshal in Tucson, and he accepted. His days of rootless wandering were over. He and Tabitha were married the following spring, in a small adobe church filled with their new, unlikely family, a grateful newspaper editor, a reformed rancher's wife, and a proud Apache chief and his daughter. Tabitha never stopped writing. She became a voice for the voiceless, her articles and books shaping the future of the territory. Zach became a symbol of a new kind of law, one based on justice, not just enforcement. They built a life together, a home filled with love, laughter, and 2 children, a daughter named Emily and a son named Daniel. Years later, on their anniversary, Zach gave her a privately published collection of her poetry. The title was Her Words, My Song. Inside he had written, "To my beloved Tabitha, whose voice saved more than just her own life, it saved mine." Her story, their story, became a legend in the West, a story of how a single voice, armed only with truth and courage, could face down corruption and violence. A story of how a lawman, weary of the world's darkness, found his purpose in the light of a poet's words. It proves that even in the darkest of places, a single spark of truth can set the world ablaze. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of the strange, dark, and mysterious.